Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to fundamentally change how you look at evidence in your academic writing. We're going to shift you away from just being a passive collector of information and turn you into a master analyst, someone who absolutely controls every single piece of data on the page. Let's jump right in and address a super common trap. Does adding more tables actually make your writing more academic? I mean, there's this massive misconception out there that dumping complicated graphs and endless, incredibly dense tables into your paper automatically makes it look smarter, or heavier, or somehow more rigorous. But honestly, the reality is that overloading your work with irrelevant data actually completely disrupts the flow of your discussion and just leaves your reader confused. We've really got to draw a hard line here between mere cosmetics and true clarity. Adding things just to fill space or because, a graph looks aesthetically pleasing, that's a purely cosmetic choice. True clarity means you're using visuals for a precise analytical function. Quality and logical relevance are going to beat sheer quantity every single time. It's all about precision over decoration.
Here's exactly how we're going to fix those writing pitfalls step by step. We're covering the myth of evidence, text strategies, managing numbers, visual analytics, the 3W formula, and wrapping up with writer's ethics.
All right, part 1, the myth of evidence. Evidence cannot speak for itself. This right here is an absolute paradigm shifter. Evidence is never neutral. It literally cannot speak for itself. This completely shatters the myth that data, or quotes, are just enough to stand on their own. You have to remember, you're the analyst. You are the director. It is your absolute responsibility to explicitly interpret the meaning of the evidence and tie it directly back to your main thesis. If you aren't doing the interpreting, well, you're just acting as a data collector, not an actual academic writer. Moving on to part 2, text strategies, quotes and paraphrasing. So how do we practically use this analyst mindset when we're dealing with text? Think of it as the sandwich technique. You've got to deliberately wrap every single piece of evidence you use. Step 1, the top bun, is context. Introduce the author and explain why this quote is even relevant before you drop it in. Step 2 is the quote itself. And step 3, the bottom bun, is the explanation. You analyze the implications and connect it right back to your central argument. The secret here is to literally never leave a quote undefended on the page. And that brings us to a huge warning. Avoid floating quotes at all costs. You've definitely seen these, right? Maybe even written a few. A floating quote is just a standalone sentence that gets dropped into a paragraph with zero introduction and zero follow-up. It completely wrecks the grammatical flow and, even worse, it surrenders your intellectual authority straight over to the source. Remember, quotes are there to support your voice, definitely not to replace it. All right, let's hit part 3, managing numbers. Relevance over volume. Now, what about quantitative stuff? A really great rule of thumb is to just never include data without a crystal clear purpose. We have to make the shift from purposeless data, numbers thrown in just because you happen to find them in your research, over to meaningful numbers. Every single digit you include must be narratively integrated. It needs to show a scale, a rate of change, or a vital difference in categories. If a stat doesn't help answer your specific research question, just leave it out. Don't drown your reader in a sea of irrelevant fractions. Which leads us nicely into part 4, visual analytics, tables and graphs. You have to start treating your visuals as actual tools for analysis, not just page decorations. Here's a super quick guide for that. Choosing the right visual depends entirely on your analytical goal. Comparing multiple items across variables, you want a table. Tracking long-term trends, that's going to be a line graph. Looking at discrete, separate categories, bar graph. Proportions of a whole, pie chart. Always select based on the specific question the data answers, not just what looks the fanciest in your editing software. But hey, you've got to remember this golden rule. Tables and graphs support your text. They absolutely do not replace it. If your reader is sweating trying to decipher some incredibly overloaded, complex graph without your textual guidance, then that visual has completely failed its purpose. Don't rely on the image to do the heavy lifting for you. You must introduce it, interpret it, and seamlessly connect it in your writing.
Let's get into part 5, the 3W formula for crafting effective captions.
To make sure your visuals actually work every single time, you need a foolproof labeling method. Enter the 3W formula: what, how, and why. What explains the basic content, time period, or location. How highlights the methodology, the source, or the scale. And why, which is absolutely the most critical part, explains the significance and the direct connection to your research question. This formula ensures your captions act as an analytical gateway rather than just being some boring, vague title. So how does this actually look in your writing? It's all about analytical cross-referencing. When you reference a visual in your text, don't just lazily write, "See Table 2." Come on, you gotta give clear analytical signals. Write something more like, "This comparison proves, in Table 2, that." By doing this, you're telling the reader exactly what to look for. It prevents them from having to guess your intentions and keeps you firmly in the driver's seat of the narrative.
And finally, part 6, writer's ethics, honesty, and control.
Mastering all of this isn't just about writing with better style, It's deeply, deeply tied to your ethics as a researcher. Ethical presentation means being completely honest with your design, so absolutely no manipulated axes or selective scales just to exaggerate a tiny change. It means being fully transparent about your methodologies and sources. And yeah, it means having the courage to openly acknowledge the limitations or the weird anomalies in your data. Doing all of this builds a really profound trust and showcases true intellectual honesty to your academic community. So I'm going to leave you with this final kind of provocative thought to chew on. Are you controlling your evidence, or is your evidence actually controlling you? Next time you sit down to write a paper, are you going to take the director's seat, carefully guiding your reader through every single number and quote? Or are you just going to let a chaotic pile of copy-pasted graphs completely run the show? The choice you make there changes absolutely everything about your writing. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.